after he snapped that kids in Moscow, Idaho. We were all shocked. When
everybody with us tonight, I'm Hannah Doba, filling in for Blake Burman, and this is The Hill on News Nation. Is it justice or revenge? The political fallout from former FBI Director James Comey's recent indictment. Trump responding to that before leaving the White House earlier today.
They are sick, radical left people, and they can't get away with it. And Comey was one of the people. He wasn't the biggest, but he's a dirty cop. He's always been a dirty cop. Everybody knew it.
Meanwhile, federal agents firing pepper balls and tear gas in a Chicago suburb as protests continue outside an ICE facility there. We go live with the latest. Plus, Netanyahu gets a frosty reception at the UN General Assembly in New York as Trump says he thinks they are close to a deal on Gaza. We discuss. And Trump saying he will use tariff revenue to bail out struggling U.S. farmers. We go live with one of those farmers to ask whether or not this bailout will be enough. But first, on the Hill, former FBI director and longtime adversary of President Trump, James Comey, indicted by a grand jury on charges of making a false statement and obstruction of a congressional proceeding. Each charge carrying up to 5 years in prison. Now, these charges are connected to a statement Comey made back in 2020 while being questioned about a previous congressional testimony in 2017. Comey stating under oath he was never an anonymous source or authorized one as it related to Russia or Clinton investigations. We have Bill McGinley, Scott Bolden, our team of legal experts, standing by to discuss the details of this indictment in just a moment. But we begin tonight with Kelly Meyer, who's at the White House with the latest response. Kelly, busy day. What's going on?
Yeah, hey there, Hannah. So some critics say that President Trump is going further than former President Richard Nixon and his infamous enemies list. Now, President Trump continues to say there isn't a list and that this isn't revenge, but President Trump says more will be prosecuted.
There'll be others. Look, that's my opinion. They weaponized the Justice Department like nobody in history. What they've done is terrible. And so frankly, I hope there are others. You can't let this happen to a country.
Meanwhile, former FBI Director James Comey tells President Trump's Justice Department to bring it on.
My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
Comey denies the charges against him as President Trump doubled down on those charges today, saying that Comey is a, quote, dirty cop. Now, as former FBI Director James Comey tells President Trump's Justice Department to bring it on, he says he is not afraid of them. Now, President Trump's Attorney General says the DOJ will follow the facts. Hannah.
Kelly Meyer live at the White House. Thank you so much. And joining me now is Bill McGinley, former cabinet secretary in the first Trump administration and former D.C. Democratic Party chairman and News Nation political contributor, Scott Bolden. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon.
So, Scott, I will start with you. Critics on the right say that this proves that the FBI was politicizing what was going on back then. Here's what President Trump said earlier today, and I'll talk to you on the other side.
It's about justice, really. It's not revenge. It's about justice. It's also about the fact that you can't let this go on. They are sick, radical left people, and they can't get away with it.
He called Comey a dirty cop several times. My first question, is this indictment legally sound or is it politically motivated?
Well, as a former state prosecutor in New York, I got to tell you, it's flimsy at best. You know, there's no saying you can indict a ham sandwich. And in this case, the real problem here is the vindictiveness or the feel of vindictiveness, not from politics, but because we have very public firing of the Eastern District federal prosecutor. You have the hiring of one of the president's main people. You have a declination memo within DOJ, if that's true. And you have several prosecutors prosecutors, remember the special prosecutor even before then, as well as other prosecutors and inspector generals who looked at this and found nothing. Now, under the federal rules, under 12B, there is a motion to dismiss for vindictiveness. Normally it happens after trial when you would employ it with additional charges. Here, though, I think every time the president opens his mouth about Comey and says all that he says about Comey, which is projection on his part, is evidence to be put before a federal judge. I don't care who appointed that federal judge, right? No federal judge wants a BS complaint or indictment in front of them, and I think they're going to make a motion to dismiss. Whether the government appeals it or not, or the White House appeals it or not, because, you know, the White House and DOJ are one and the same now with this indictment. But be that as it may, we'll have to take a close look at it. Look for them to move to dismiss immediately. Bill, and by the way, Eastern District of Virginia is the rocket docket, so it's going to get some action quick.
Bill, I do want to pose the same question to you. Is this accountability at the highest level, or do you think this is dangerous overreach?
No, I think it's accountability. Number one, the evidence was presented to a grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia. That is a collar county of Washington, D.C. It is a very liberal county filled with government workers. They apparently presented 3 charges. The grand jury rejected 1, but returned 2 charges for the indictment. Number 2, there's been an ongoing investigation within the FBI led by Kash Patel and the other leadership. We don't know what documents they have. We don't know what electronic records they have. The witnesses in this trial, if it makes it to trial, and I agree with Scott, they're going to file a motion to dismiss, but if this makes it to trial, it's not going to be a bunch of MAGA folks taking the stand. It's going to be Jim Comey's inner circle and other FBI officials and DOJ officials who are going to testify as to whether he did leak or authorize leaks. And then falsely testified. And the obstruction charge, to me, is the one that should be most concerning for him, because it's going to go beyond the single statement. It could open up a lot of other.
But you got to have witnesses, and you got to have evidence. You know, facts are stubborn. So McCabe, the former deputy FBI individual, denies the lie, denies that Comey told him to look, or that he was the leak. No, McCabe has been on the record saying this, and he's going to be the defense's #1 witness. And watch this, the prosecution is going to have to use McCabe
I'm not sure
too.
McCabe is person number 3.
Okay, well,
I mean,
whatever person he is, you got it. No witness, no case. And if he is or he isn't, if they've got more, so be it. But you've got the making of a political vindictive prosecution here. It smells bad.
Well,
and it's not going to pass the mustard test with a federal judge.
Let me jump in and just say this. All the Democrats that are pounding the table, with all due respect to my
Comey's no friend of ours, by the way.
I was just going to say, I remember what happened with Hillary Clinton. But one of the things that I would point out is that where were they when President Trump was charged 4 times, right? 91 counts. Four cases that really had no basis in fact or law. We saw this. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. They stuck up for the rule of law. So the people who actually had credibility from the Democratic side, I'll listen to them because they tell me that they're principled on this issue. But a lot of them were spiking the football the minute that this stuff came out on President Trump. And let's see what happens with this Comey.
But Trump drove that narrative, if you will, and it was all based on facts. And I don't think the president ever said a word about Donald Trump. He did all the talking, and he would have been convicted probably if he hadn't run for office and won.
Alvin Bragg's office had a former DOJ official from the Biden DOJ.
Doesn't matter.
You had a lot of contacts.
We do have to end it here, gentlemen.
And another thing, let me say this.
It's going to be interesting to see how this indictment just reshapes the narrative for so many Americans who are wary of the FBI.
And there may be a superseding indictment.
Yeah, it could be. Could be. Based on what they got.
One thing you agreed on. Gentlemen, thank you, Bill and Scott. We'll see you later in the show. Don't go too far. And joining us now is former Chief of Staff in the Trump White House and NewsNation contributor Mick Mulvaney. Mick, always good to see you. As you know, and we heard with this panel, Democrats will argue that this is political payback. Is it? How do Republicans make that case to voters that it's not?
Look, what a great discussion that y'all just had. That's exactly why I love being on NewsNation. You had a chance to have an adult conversation about it. We understand as Republicans why Democrats think this is political vendetta. I get it. But at the same time, I hope they understand that, you know, we were here a year ago. They tried to put Donald Trump in jail for paying back a loan early. Let's please allow that to sink in. So yeah, I understand why there's a lot of folks say, oh, this is a vendetta, this is revenge. But at the same time, there's a really good argument that it's simply applying the same standards to folks like James Comey. And I'll say the same thing that I said when Donald Trump got indicted. Let's let the system play out. It was a really good conversation about a grand jury. That's the kind of debate you should have about this. Not, oh my goodness, Trump is the devil, or oh my he's the risen savior. This is a really good discussion, and I'd be curious to see how it plays out through the judicial system.
Mick, you know Trump's mind as well as anyone. You spent time with him inside the White House. What's he thinking? Why go after Comey now?
Why not? I mean, there's a circumstance here that if they have facts that they think justify an indictment, clearly they do. Clearly a grand jury agreed. I think that you've just made Bill McGinley made the point about they offered 3 charges and the grand jury said no to 1, but yes to 2. That's a really insightful sort of approach to this. If they've got the evidence, or at least they've got enough to get the indictment, then they proceed. I don't think there's any reason. I don't think it's a plan. If the question is there a list in the White House that says, okay, we're going to get John Bolton, and then we're going to do Comey, and then so-and-so, and then so-and-so, I don't think that's the case. I think they're doing investigations, and when they find enough evidence that they think justifies going to jury, they're going.
I want to pivot a bit. The Epstein files. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released more details, more names today, saying Elon Musk, that's a new one, Steve Bannon, Peter Thiel, Prince Andrew, all appear in them. Does that change the story at all moving forward, Mick?
No, it doesn't. I think we've had a discussion on this show for many weeks about, you know, I never thought Donald Trump was, I thought Donald Trump's name was in the file. That shouldn't be news to anybody. Donald Trump obviously knew Epstein. So did these other people. The question is not if your name is in the file. The question is if you did anything wrong or there's evidence of any wrongdoing in the file. I don't think there's anything in there for Donald Trump, because if there were, it would have leaked out a long time ago. I got news for you. If there was really nasty stuff about Steve Bannon in there, it probably would have come out already. We've also said from the very beginning that while we don't think Trump is protecting himself, that the Trump administration may be protecting other people, just as the Biden administration might be protecting other people. Keep in mind, the Biden team had this same file for 4 years, and we never heard anything about it. So I don't think it changes the analysis. It certainly is going to bring it back to the forefront, and there's this little drip, 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 this continual drip, drip, drip of information that is going to continue to drag this issue out. But I don't think the merits have changed just because these names have filtered out now.
Mick Mulvaney, thank you so much, my friend. I'm sure I'll see you on Morning in America this weekend. We appreciate you. And coming up on the other side, I will see you tomorrow. Coming up, President Trump says he wants to help struggling farmers.
We're going to take some of that tariff money that we made, we're going to give it to our farmers.
So will there be a farm aid package? Will it help, if at all? I'll talk to a 4th-generation farmer who's been impacted by Trump's tariffs. Plus, tear gas, pepper balls, rising tensions. A peaceful protest gets out of hand outside an immigration facility in Chicago. We'll take you there live. Stay with us, The Hill. We'll be right back.
I didn't know that 99% of people over 50 already have the virus that causes shingles, and it could reactivate at any time.
I learned that the hard way.
But you don't have to. Talk to your healthcare provider today.
Welcome back, everyone. Do you remember this moment? Argentina's President Javier Milei waving that chainsaw at February's Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington. It was a gift to Elon Musk and a symbol of slashing government jobs. I know you remember that. Well, now Milei could be cutting American farmers out of business. This coming after the Trump administration threw Argentina a $20 billion financial lifeline just this week to stabilize their economy. The deal includes potential loans and purchasing debt. Argentina then turned around and suspended its export taxes. That includes a 26% tax on soybeans. That move prompted China to double their purchases of Argentinian soybeans, literally overnight, leaving American farmers in the dust. Now, these farmers are already hurting from President Trump's trade war. China has historically been the top buyer of U.S. soybeans. Not anymore. Last year alone, China bought more than $12 billion worth. That's a lot of money. But sales have dropped to almost zero since Trump imposed steep tariffs on Chinese goods. Again, look at your screen. $12 billion to zero this year. The president now hinting at a bailout for American farmers. Here's what he said.
We're going to take some of that tariff money that we made, we're going to give it to our farmers. We're going to make sure that our farmers are in great shape.
NewsNation's Jessica Cartalia has more from Tarrytown, New York, a beautiful area, but I know farmers are struggling. Good evening, Jessica. What are you learning tonight about the potential impact on these farmers?
Well, we've learned quite a bit today, Hannah. Yeah, and it is a gorgeous night. There are chickens right behind me here. The fear is that it's getting harder and harder for these farmers to even make ends meet or even come up even, especially in light of everything that you just described, with Argentina undercutting the U.S. government and then dealing directly with China without taxes. Congress will need to sign off, though, on President Trump's proposal before they can do anything. And even if they do, the first checks aren't likely to get to farmers until sometime next year, because they'd have to come up with some sort of package by November 21st. The timing of all of this is critical because the fall harvest is just getting underway, and many, as I said, just struggling to break even.
At the end of the day, a lot of the farmers are struggling to even break even, and they're eroding away their equity in their farms. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen, because eventually we're starting to lose farms right now, and we can't afford to lose more farms.
Yeah, and they said all of this even happened during the Biden administration. It's just kind of been this steady decline and making things more difficult for them. On top of all the market losses, input costs are also surging. So, Hannah, fertilizer up 37%, fuel up 32%, seed costs up 18%, and interest expenses up 73%. All of this leading to lower confidence, obviously, in the proposal. But, Hannah, these farmers are thinking positively, but a fear that without help soon, we'll see more of these family farms going away.
And those rising farm costs, all within 5 years, that is quite the increase. Jessica, thank you so much, live in Tarrytown, New York. Yeah. And joining us now is John Boyd. He's the founder and president of the National Black Farmers Association. John, welcome back. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to start. What impacts are you seeing from these policies thus far?
Well, you know, I'm sitting there listening to the show, and it's devastating to hear that the president is putting $20 billion into Argentina. And, you know, we don't see that as putting America first, you know. We see it as, you know, contributing to putting farmers out of business. The president's tariffs have hurt America's farmers. The market prices have plummeted. Farmers are facing foreclosure. Suicides are up. Farm foreclosures are up. All these things are up, and the administration has been so far slow to react. And, you know, I just listened to the president and said, well, how about using some of the tariff monies from there? And that's been challenged in court, the president's whole initiative there. And he faced, you know, a couple of decisions that's going to slow that down. That's not a process that we want to go through.
Sure.
During the administration, and this it started a little further back than 5 years ago when the president first announced the tariffs on China. I was selling soybeans for $16.80 a bushel. And then the price immediately plummeted all the way down to $8, and the markets never came back is what's happening. So as China has turned to other countries to buy soybeans from, there isn't any new markets here in America that's helping America's farmers. And just like
John,
you talked about, the input costs going up.
I do want to ask you, I want to go back to what you mentioned about tariff money, because the president says tariffs will hopefully help farmers down the line. That takes time. It could take a year, it could take 2. Do farmers have that kind of time?
Absolutely, unequivocally, no. We don't have that type of time. And that's, you know, we're asking the administration. Matter of fact, I'm calling on the president today to stop farm foreclosures in this country and to put a complete farm moratorium in place on direct loans, guaranteed loans, and other private sector banks that make farm loans. America's farmers shouldn't be going under while the president is playing footsies with tariffs. This isn't an act of God that's hurting us. It's these policies and the president's tariffs that's really hurting America's farmers.
John, I have about 10 seconds left, and I'm sorry to rush this answer, but I know you met with other farmers today. Many of them voted for Trump. Very quickly, what are they saying today about our president and farming?
They're very, very disappointed in the action that they've seen so far in this administration.
Okay.
They feel great by the president that he hasn't acted more swiftly to put real aid to help America's farmers.
John Boyd, thank you for rushing that answer. I've talked to a lot of farmers, and they're sharing the same story. I appreciate you tonight. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
And there's still much more ahead on the Hill, a tense showdown between protesters and ICE. How a small Chicago suburb is now the front line of an immigration crackdown. We are live in the Windy City. Plus this.
I think we have maybe a deal on Gaza, very close to a deal on Gaza.
President Trump says they're close to a deal on Gaza. You heard him. As the Israeli Prime Minister speaks at the UN today, why delegates walked out during his speech. All of that next.
Is so powerful, you could have better knees in just 1 week. Maybe that's why it's the #1 selling joint brand at GNC. But you can only get your complimentary sample by texting FEET to 369-369. Plus, text now and we'll include a tube of Instaflex pain cream with its exclusive oxygenated oil for fast-acting relief from the pain of arthritis, backaches, and sore muscles. Absolutely free. Text FEET to 369-369.
Welcome back. I'm Hannah Doba, and for Blake Burman. Protests in Des Moines, Iowa tonight after ICE agents detained Des Moines Public School Superintendent Ian Roberts this morning. ICE says Roberts was in the country on an expired student visa and was given a final removal order back in May. The agency also says Roberts had an existing weapons charge. Anti-ICE protests erupting across the country today. Chaotic scenes playing out in the Chicago area. Protesters surrounding an ICE facility that's being used as the main processing center for President Trump's Operation Midway Blitz. Tear gas was deployed. Arrests were made. President Trump responded to similar ICE protests we've seen recently on the West Coast in Portland.
When you go out to Portland and you see what's happening in Portland, this is like nobody's ever seen anything like it every night. And this has gone on for years. These are professional agitators. Right. These are bad people, and they're paid a lot of money by rich people.
Now, all this comes just 2 days after a deadly shooting at an ICE facility in Dallas, Texas. Law enforcement saying the shooter was clearly targeting ICE agents. Our Alex Capriello is live outside the Chicago area ICE facility with more on the protest today. Alex, you were out there all day. I was watching you. It got very dicey earlier in the day.
Yeah, it did. We were out here beginning at 7 a.m. Central. I wondered whether or not protests would be out in full force at that time. Sure enough, they were. Several hundred, I would estimate. They were mainly broken up into two groups. There was one large group that was right here outside the ICE facility. You can see the building right there in the background, the barbed wire, which keeps people out. Of course, these are new additions, about 8-foot tall security perimeter fencing that they established just within the last week since we saw the protests get out of hand. And then on the other side was other protests as well, and that's where we saw at its peak those less lethal methods like the pepper balls, the tear gas, as well as other forms that they were using to disperse the crowd. So in all, at about 5 hours later, the crowd really did diminish. There's a few stragglers that are still here at this time. They are promising to once again show up in full force tomorrow afternoon for another round of protests. We also expect it to continue into Sunday as well. So we're going to have to wait and see. Significant escalations today, at least 2 arrests by my count that I witnessed. We're still awaiting on those official numbers from ICE, though. Hannah.
All right. Stay safe along with your team. Alex Capriello live in Chicago for us tonight. Thank you. And for more on this, Texas Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar. Congressman, good to see you again. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
We just saw Alex's report. You support the protests that are going on outside right now at so many facilities, not just Chicago.
Well, look, I support ICE and I support immigration enforcement within the bounds of accountability, proportionality, and of course, respect for civil rights. Look, people can protest, but the moment they start going into interrupting ICE operations or obstructing vehicles, then law enforcement has to come in. You know, we have ICE. ICE was established for a very simple reason, and that is people coming into the U.S., people dealing with visa overstays, and people that have to be deported. So I support ICE. I support immigration reform, but within certain bounds.
The Democratic leader in the House said this about the rhetoric we're hearing in the country right now. Let's take a quick listen, Congressman.
The Department of Homeland Security, they should be ashamed of themselves. They put out what effectively is a hit list against Democratic public officials, put a target on the backs of Democratic public officials with outrageous and outlandish charges, but they need to look in the mirror and reflect on their own behavior.
Of course, that's Hakeem Jeffries. Congressman, do you agree with him? Is the Department of Homeland Security putting Democrats in danger?
Well, look, you know, I think both sides, every side, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, have to watch what they say because words do count. Words do have repercussions. And we've seen this, what happened in Dallas. We've seen this in other places. So, again, I think it's very, very important that people just tone down the rhetoric on both sides.
Well, with saying that, President Trump is pointing a finger when he discusses who to blame. This is what he said.
The radical left is causing this problem, not the right, the radical left. And it's going to get worse, and ultimately it's going to go back on them.
Look, a lot of finger pointing. There's no denying that. Your reaction to the president?
Look, I've always, and let me say this generally, I've always said this, that when you put blame, you divide. When you find solutions, you actually unite. So I think we need to find a way that we can work together. Look, I've been on the Homeland Appropriations for, I would say, over 10 years, working with the men and women in green, Border Patrol, blue, which is Customs, and of course, ICE. And I support Homeland. But again, we got to do this within certain bounds of accountability, oversight, and oversight is important.
DHS, they released some numbers, and it's pretty interesting. They announced that 2 million illegal immigrants have left the U.S. in less than 250 days. That includes an estimated 1.6 million who have voluntarily self-deported. More than 400,000 have been deported. Do you view this as a success? Do you want to see more of this, Congressman, as we see these numbers increase of people just self-deporting or deporting?
You look, and I think those numbers, I think ICE has lower numbers, I believe. You know, I've seen people talk about deportation numbers. If you recall, President Obama had probably higher numbers. He was called the deporter in chief, but, you know, he just basically followed the law. So I'm one of those, you know, that it's important that we look at, you know, who we ought to go after. And by that, I'm talking about the criminals, you know, the people that keep coming over and over and over again, people that are at risk. But, you know, when it comes to people that have been here for a long time, don't have a criminal record, and I believe over 71, 72% of the people that are in ICE custody right now, I think we got almost 60,000 people in ICE custody, about 71, 72 have no criminal record. And those are the people that are having an impact, a negative impact on the economy because we can't seem to find enough workers to do certain type of jobs in the U.S.
We've certainly heard that from farmers. Congressman Henry Cuellar, always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good Friday.
You as well. And coming up, the Prime Minister of Israel calling on Hamas to release the hostages.
If you do, you will live. If you don't, Israel will hunt you down.
Of course, that's Benjamin Netanyahu speaking at the UN today. Will his message move the needle? And what President Trump is saying about a possible deal. We will be right back.
Use it. 5, my mom uses it. 6, you can bring your own phone if you want. 7, also your number. Bring that too. 8, are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, is this my commercial?
Welcome back to The Hill. I'm Hannah Doba filling in for Blake Burman tonight. And this was President Trump earlier today, disembarking Air Force One on Long Island to take in the Ryder Cup. But it was when the president was leaving the White House that he made this very bold prediction regarding the turmoil in the Middle East. Here's what he said.
It's looking like we have a deal on Gaza, and we'll let you know. I think it's a deal that will get the hostages back. It's going to be a deal that will end the war. It's going to be a deal it's going to be peace.
Of course, this all comes on the same day Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the UN General Assembly. This was the correlating scene outside, with pro-Palestinian protesters objecting to Netanyahu's UN presence. That is a lot of people. Now, upon his introduction inside, many UN delegates stood up. They left the General Assembly chamber. For the remaining delegates, the Israeli Prime Minister delivered this message.
Much of the world no longer remembers October 7th, but we remember. So to the remaining Hamas leaders and to the jailers of our hostages, I now say, lay down your arms. Let my people go. Free the hostages, all of them, the whole 48. Free the hostages now. If you do, you will live. If you don't, Israel will hunt you down.
Now I'm happy to bring back the entire panel. Bill McGinley, former cabinet secretary in the first Trump administration. Yemisi Egbawale is a Democratic strategist. And, of course, A. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor. And Lauren Wright, NewsNation political contributor, also joining us. Lauren, good to see you. Okay, I will start with you, Yemisi. Let's start with Netanyahu. Is anything he's going to say move the needle at this point?
Absolutely not. And if you did a supercut of any speech he's given in front of the UN, it would all have the same similar themes, and it would be the same repeats again and again and again. He went into this speech at the UN already in contention with them, right? He has rejected reports by the Commission that there is a genocide. He has rejected any findings that they are restricting aid. He has told the UN that their conclusions about free speech and journalism within Gaza is incorrect, even though we know that for years, journalists have not been allowed into Gaza, and those that have only gone in restrictive paths with the IDF. He has refused to see the writing in the wall, which is that he's going to have to come to some kind of middle ground here. If he wants to retain the same support that he's always had from the U.S., I remember this well, working for President Biden, we stood beside him and we felt the same pushback and the same kind of protests at that time. But now we've become more comfortable with saying, I really do think that there is something brewing in Gaza and that children are dying.
He seems very defiant. Bill, what message does that send to the world when many delegates, dozens of them, just walked out?
Look, I think Netanyahu and the state of Israel is one of the unique places on earth where it's surrounded by people who don't want it to exist on all sides. I think that's a unique situation for Israel. I think any peace agreement, and I think this is what Netanyahu was trying to say, the hostages have to come back. I think that a number of these states have to recognize Israel's right to exist. And then I think what we need is, and President Trump is providing this leadership, try to get a regional deal to try and make a lasting peace, get aid into the civilians in Gaza, but repair the damage that's been done between the Palestinians and the Israelis. I think this has to be a regional solution. I think Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, is working on that. And hopefully we can get a peace that's durable and lasting.
But there's so much damage that's been done, whether you call it genocide or starvation. No one's forgotten about October 7th. No one, every country, most of us, condemned that attack as unwarranted. Every Palestinian is not Hamas, nor do they support Hamas. And yet and still, you know, the bombing continues. And the Palestinians really have nowhere to go. Many of the Arab countries won't accept them because they've got land. And then, so what is the deal? This deal has taken way too long because the hostages haven't come home. The killing fields of Gaza are still there, and we're still talking about it. And I mean Democrats and Republicans, but Republicans have the power, if you will, to condemn Israel on some of this stuff, and they just won't do it.
Lauren, I want to pose the next question to you. President Trump just posted on Truth Social. I want to read what he said. part of what he said. I am pleased to report that we are having a very inspired and productive discussion with the Middle Eastern community concerning Gaza. Intense negotiations have been going on for 4 days and will continue for as long as necessary in order to get a successfully completed agreement. Again, this just came out in the last few minutes. Lauren, your response, especially with Netanyahu a few hours ago, again, being very defiant.
Well, I hope he's right, but I have real doubts because Netanyahu is asking for very reasonable things. Give all the hostages back, which Hamas has refused to do. Hamas cannot be in control of the region, and you'll never have a two-state solution as long as they control the government there. Everyone knows this. And they have to disarm, which they have refused as recently as yesterday, 2 days ago, 10 years ago. Their explicit goal is they'll never give up as many October 7th as it takes to destroy the state of Israel and kill as many Jews as possible. Those are their explicit goals. And Israel is not a moral equivalence, as the UN thinks. I thought the showing today was very embarrassing. They're very much alone, and there's empty promises from European countries who don't want to give aid but are happy to say, okay, we'll recognize statehood, which they know means nothing as long as Hamas is there. They're happy to walk out and not even listen to a speech. I mean, I found it deeply disturbing, and I thought it was really sad for Western values and Western civilization, with the notable exception of the U.S. and our president.
Yeah, Netanyahu had very pointed words for Western nations like France, Canada, Britain, Australia, who have pledged to recognize a Palestinian state, like you mentioned, Lauren. Here's what he said about that.
You know what message the leaders who recognize a Palestinian state this week sent to the Palestinians? It's a very clear message. Murdering Jews pays off.
Yemisi, what is he getting right or wrong here?
I mean, it's just, I almost want him to hire some kind of crisis comms firm at this point. He is deeply unpopular within his own country. Yeah. The families of the hostages feel that he is not doing enough. The citizens that live within Israel feel that he is putting them at risk with his own rhetoric. I mean, at this point, he has to somehow acquiesce and give a little bit to folks. To stand up there defiantly as if he has full-throated support is absolutely ridiculous. The emperor has no clothes.
Bill, Yemisi makes a good point. One of the largest protests were last weekend in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but we hear Netanyahu making these statements. What is he doing right or wrong?
I think the Netanyahu government remembers the horror of October 7th, and I know that everybody acknowledges that, but the atrocities that were committed on that day, if that would have happened in the United States from one of our border states, I don't think the United States 3 years later would be as forgiving as people want Israel to be right now. So I understand where the Netanyahu government is coming from and the constant threat. Because remember, it's not just October 7th. Israel faces rocket bombardments every day. There are incursions and terrorist attacks on a weekly basis in that country. And I think Americans and others would do well to remember the threat that they face on a constant basis. And that's why I think that the peace agreement that the Trump administration is hopefully going to be able to broker has to be regional so that all the other actors come in as well.
But Scott, is it realistic to assume that Hamas is just going to relinquish control and there'll be a government that the Palestinian people do want in office?
Listen, I can agree with my colleague Lauren, and I could even agree with Bill, without a doubt. But I can also be sensitive to the pictures and videos of the killing fields of Gaza, and that there is no longer a military objective for Israel. That's internal Israel documents that say that, and yet the bombing continues. Now, and when I say I agree with my colleagues, I can say all Hamas has to do is release those hostages, right? They haven't done that. And that is a feeding point for the continued push. But every Palestinian is not Hamas, and Palestinians are entitled to a decent way of life, whether it's in Palestine or somewhere else, and you just can't ignore it. It can't be a vacuum on one side without looking at the other side and saying, we've got to do something. If you're part of the human condition, the starving and the killings have got to stop, notwithstanding October 7th. You can be right about both. Give the hostages up, but collateral damage cannot be 100,000 Palestinians who had nothing to do with October 7th. And you can live with both of those. You just got to act. We've got to do something. Western countries, Arab countries, Do something about it. Right now, all we're doing is talking about it, and the killing continues.
Scott, Yemisi, Bill, Lauren, thanks so much for joining me tonight, guys. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And be sure to catch The Hill Sunday this weekend as well, hosted by our good friend Chris Steyerwalt. He will be talking to the Republican congressman from Oklahoma, Tom Cole. Chris will also be talking with Ohio Congresswoman Amelia Sykes. Be sure to watch The Hill Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern. And coming up on the other side, host of On Balance, Leland Vittert, joins me next to talk about his new book and his NewsNation special. It's called Born Lucky. It's about growing up with autism. Looking forward to this conversation. Don't go anywhere.
Clinical studies. Instaflex Advanced is so powerful, I had better knees in just 1 week. You got to try it.
Instaflex Advanced is the #1 selling joint brand at GNC, but you can only get your complimentary sample by texting ARCH to 369-369. Plus, text NOW, and we'll include a tube of Instaflex pain cream for fast-acting relief from the pain of arthritis, backaches, and sore muscles absolutely free. Text ARCH to 369-369 today.
You probably know our next guest from his show On Balance, right here on NewsNation, every night at 9 p.m. But Leland Vittert's path to success had a lot more hurdles than you might ever expect. Way before Leland would have to learn to navigate a career in journalism, a diagnosis of autism meant he would have to learn how to navigate functioning, quote unquote, normally in society with tasks that come naturally to almost everyone else around him, seemingly. It's all chronicled in his new book, Born Lucky, a dedicated father, a grateful son, and my journey with autism. Leland joins me now. Leland, I'm so excited to talk to you. A lot of hype around this book.
I'm not really used to being on this seat in the set, but I'm glad to be here. Welcome to Washington.
Thank you. I love Washington. I can't wait to read your book. Now, I'm learning more and more about you.
Yes.
At a young age, it wasn't just kids who labeled you as weird. It was adults, it was teachers, it was principals.
Yeah.
That's so upsetting. What kind of impact does that have on a kid and now as an adult?
Well, let's put it this way. It is phenomenal training for a Washington newsroom.
I believe you.
Okay, it is the best training you could possibly get is middle school. But no, you brought up that story. You know, in 7th grade, my parents had pulled me out of a school in 5th grade because the bullying was so bad. And in 7th grade, my parents get called into the principal's office 2 or 3 weeks into school, and they think they're just going for a normal meeting, and the principal starts off and says, you know, most of the people here at this school think Lucky, which was my childhood nickname, is pretty weird. And yeah, they said, okay, so that's arrow number 1 through my dad's heart, and then she followed up and she said, and I do too. And that, Henna, is sort of the basis, because my parents didn't tell anybody, and we chronicle it in Born Lucky, we say why they didn't tell anybody that I had this diagnosis.
Your dad quit his job.
He did. And we go through the sacrifices he made. You can see me some of my very first times on air. The sacrifices he made because he said, I am not going to adapt the world to Lucky. I am going to adapt Lucky to the world.
Wow. And now we're talking about autism so much more, but that wasn't a term that was used when we were growing up.
No, it was, you know, people who know to be autistic was what we now call profound autism. But this book is a story of hope for anybody, whether it's autism, anxiety, ADHD, any parent, every parent who has a struggling kid.
I cannot wait to read it, Leland. Thank you. Born Lucky, by the way, will be released next week. And you can watch On Balance tonight with Leland Vittert starting at 9 Eastern right here on NewsNation. Thank you so much for watching The Hill on NewsNation. Blake Burman will be back on Monday. Let's send it over to Elizabeth Vargas Reports. That show starts right now. Have a good night.